Yeah, I'm going to talk about the French Connection 1 and 2. You're getting both. Only there's two films. It's not like it's a series where I have to watch multiple films. There's two because Gene Hackman didn't want to do a third one. A film called Nighthawks with Stallone came out a few years after French Connection 2, which was originally written to be French Connection 3, but Gene Hackman read and didn't like it and wasn't so keen on playing Doyle again, so it didn't happen. We've got Nighthawks, which is a fun Stallone film, but it's a bit weird. But you have these two. The first one, directed by William Friedkin, made a fortune. Was won Oscars, was quickly acclaimed. Got some controversy because they thought it wasn't critical enough of the Gene Hackman character. Then years later, we got French Connection 2, which I think is about 4 or 5 years later. Directed by John Frankenheimer, and Hackman took a while to come back. And it's only really Hackman and Fernando who was the villain, come back. Roy Scheider was off doing Jaws, off becoming a movie star at that point. So, and it was a very different film. In some ways more conventional, in some ways more unconventional than the first. I like both films, but they feel very different. And when you watch someone on a projector, you actually start to appreciate how cinematic both are and how propulsive both are, but in different ways. But you can also see why the first one really took off and the second one did well, but didn't do massively well, because it has a sequence, which I'll get to, which kills the pace, but also is the best part of the film. So the first one, the Oscar-winning one, a police procedural that was winning Oscars, that was unusual. And it was the thing that propelled William Friedkin to the top for a while. Where it basically was it was the biggest drug bust in history for America at the time. Started off with street level cops who spotted something unusual with one guy in a club, followed him because their hunches were to follow people who were spending too much for what their business was and check out what the past was. And this guy had a criminal past as his girlfriend. It was like, okay, he's tied to somebody. He's out in a swanky club with good clothes. He's tied to somebody. And they follow him and they start to connect him up to a lawyer for who's tied to drug people. So they start to realize there's something here. But what the film is really good at is showing these kind of investigations take time. People get frustrated. People think they're wasting their time, and there's interagency issues as well. And Popeye Doyle is a character who's obsessive. Hackman plays him as obsessive. He's not easy to get on with. There was a police shooting earlier on when a cop died, and he was involved. And some people don't want to work with him because of that. And also, they just know that he's obsessive. And he's called Popeye because he's into clubs. Popeye's this, Popeye's that, and he hustles people and he deals with people and he does quick grabs on different clubs where they're dealing drugs, just to make quick scores so that his bust rate's up. And watching the film, you see is it's like people just want to get high. It's it does feel like he's a bit obsessive about making sure people who are on the lower end of the economy can't get a break from life while he's drinking and having casual sex and things, and he sees his own ways of doing that, so he's his own kind of addict. He's addicted to the chase as well. So he's an addict who's training other addicts, basically. And the film doesn't shy away from that. The film doesn't comment on it, but doesn't hide it either. It's you're seeing this in motion. The film was respects enough to say, you can figure this out yourself. You know what this guy is. And Roy Scheider plays his partner, who's the more reasonable one. And he's the kind of common sense ones that keeps him from going way over the top and getting into a lot of trouble. And from this, based in reality, it's based on two cops who did follow these guys and get the bust. The Friedkin looked at the case. He talked to the people. He brought the cops in who were involved and had good relations with them and one of the cops involved became a producer later on, working with Friedkin, amongst other people. And the guy Doyle was based on actually is a part in the film, playing the boss who puts Doyle down all the time. But the sense is, Friedkin, there was a book written on it. Friedkin didn't like the book, and they basically worked the film from what actually happened. So there were actually working sequences from like what they'd actually did. So there's a lot of sequences that are very dialogue light, where you're watching people follow other people, and you're looking at the techniques they had, different techniques they had to follow people who they were out for, and how they like looked characters. So one car would fall, and then another car would take over, so they wouldn't seem that the same cars follow them all the time. And the same with people as well. So if you thought a guy was following you, the other guy would suddenly just break off and go the other way, and it's like, oh, he's not following me at all. So the film's about all the technique of being a cop in this time period, following these people in New York in the 60s, because this thing took place in the 60s. Even though it's set in the 70s. But there wasn't much difference in police tactics at that point. It was very much an old-fashioned era where everything was grungy. All the houses were cold and had basic heating. Everything looked like it dry rot. It was just like horrible. Even the expensive shops looked kind of dingy compared to what you see nowadays. It that feeling in the film of everyone's struggling to survive, and some people are struggling more than most. But Doyle was just dogged. He finds this guy that goes Frenchy, and he's like the Frenchman. He's gonna get him. Like if Doyle's this kind of moralistic fervor, he's gonna get this guy who dares coming into his country and bringing all these drugs. And the other thing of the film is you're watching, kind of, yeah, I see why they want to stop the drugs, but also I can see why people need the drugs, because this place is totally tetanus-filled hellhole. It's like, yeah, if you're in this place, you'd want the drugs. It's like understandable. So, but he's in a moral crusade going to do it, and he keeps on pushing the Frenchman as far as possible, and always been like chasing him up, figuring out what he's doing. Even the Frenchman knows he's getting chased and is messing with him. He also, Doyle was interested in him, makes him realise he better get in and out as quickly as possible because this is getting serious. So the film ratchets up, and the Frenchman also has a guy bringing the stuff in a car, who's this documentary filmmaker who's needing money, and that becomes the thread of how they're going to trap him. And you start to see the techniques that the Frenchman's doing to actually figure out how to get around the cops, and knowing the cops are following him all the time. So the film becomes this cat and mouse game between two smart people, both obsessed in their own way. One's obsessed with getting the money, and one's obsessed with catching the guy. And that propulsion keeps the film going. There's an infamous car chase sequence which comes 2/3 of the way in, with the henchman of Fernando Ray tries to assassinate Doyle, even though they don't really know that actually the police investigation is kind of stalled, but they think it's actually ahead. So they try and shoot him. They miss, and it creates this great chase where the guy's in the train and Doyle's in a car trying to chase him underneath the thing. It's one of those ones that's like, it's so famous, like it was so ripped off. It's hard to get the impact of it had when it first came out, because they were breaking lots of rules and should have been arrested for some of the stuff we're doing. But it's a great sequence. And then again, the guy getting chased to play the assassin is someone if you watch Italian crime movies, a face you'll recognise. He's in tons of them, these films from Italy. And Italy made so many French Connection rip-offs. There was a whole crime genre after French Connection in Italy for a decade, with lots of car chases. I love those films. They're very fascist, they're overtly fascist, far more than the French Connection. And you've tales like the Italian Connection, stuff like that. I mean, the cops are ridiculous in this film. They're hilariously out of date in some ways, but also wonderful for how insane they are. So the film is wonderful. The ending's terrific. The ending goes into a kind of darker area where the dog's chasing the guy down in this old warehouse where his Mina gets the better of and he shoots somebody who is a cop. And it leaves you ambiguous what's happening, and then eventually you find out that the Frenchman escaped. Leading to the French Connection tube. This one's purely fictional. The first film is based on facts. This one is like, no, we're doing another film with Gene Hackman as Doyle. Give him lots of money, make him come back. And Hackman was not very keen in coming back. Even though the film did well, he got an Oscar. He was a bit uneasy about the character of Popeye Doyle, because the guy was such a obvious, nutcase fascist guy. He's like something you wouldn't want to hang around with too much. So it made him uncomfortable. So they had to work with him for a while and get a script right. So the idea was he sent Doyle over to America. Not over from America to France to chase down Fernando Rey's character there. And he's basically bait, because they know Fernando Rey's working out of Marseille, but he's bait. Doyle's bait for this guy to come out of his hiding place. And you start to see that Rey has connections to American military and all sorts of connections there for his drugs. So they brought in John Frankenheimer to direct it. So Frankenheimer at this point had his peak, and then Howe had a lot of bombs. Like, Frankenheimer's career is weird, because he did have this great run of like Manchurian Candidate second, which didn't do very well. Grand Prix, Budman Alcatraz, The Train. He did a lot of really good films. I mean, Grand Prix has really good bits in it, but it's some bad stuff too, though. But then he went into a period where he did a lot of films that were not viewed as very good. And he started to develop a drinking problem, which he admitted to. And this one was his comeback film. It came out, it made money, it brought him back. Then he made Black Sunday, which was another good film that was meant to bring him back even more, and it didn't do very well. And then his career he made Prophecy, which was bloody awful. And his career kind of collapsed again. And he never really recovered from that. So this was one of his comeback films. And Hackman says he wasn't very comfortable with the idea of doing a sequel to someone else's film. And he never enjoyed that, but he enjoyed being in Marseille because he lived in France before, he loved France. And they kind of tried to make it its own film, even though you have this Doyle character. And they point out that Doyle's character actually causes a lot of problems because he doesn't understand the area he's in. He doesn't understand the procedures the French are doing. He doesn't understand the back and forth between French police and the criminals that's part of police work that the Americans have their own version of. And he comes in like a bone in a china shop. And Hackman has some nice scenes with some French people who can't speak French, but he's being Doyle, being like this arrogant American, and he's having fun. But then eventually Ray discovers he is there, and they kidnap him after Doyle, who has been followed by the French police, escapes the police once, and as soon as he escapes them, the guys are waiting to grab him. And what they do at that point is they get him addicted to drugs, which is the big controversial sequence in the film. That's also the most interesting sequence of the film. What this sequence does is essentially it makes Hackman a victim of the things he's obsessed by. This kind of weird thing he's got that's obsessing him, which is stopping drugs from the country, which is an absurd notion ultimately. I mean, there's been a drug war for decades in America, and it's not going anywhere because they haven't faced up to the fact that people want this. They're fighting a war that is absurd, really. They have to find another way around it, and they've not figured it out. And then here's Hackman realising that a lot of people need the drugs, and he needs the drugs ultimately once he's become addicted to it. And he sees other addicts who started out member society, and their lives collapsed into drug addiction. And then the cops find them, and they actually pull him back off of drugs and make him go basically no drugs, get out of the system. Even though if you take you to the doctor, they'll be on your record and you'll lose your job basically. even though it was you were robbed by this guy, you would never recover and stand with the police. So you're going to go cold turkey. That's what you're going to do. And that's a great sequence. Hackman really gets to act, to really show the vulnerabilities of Doyle, what he is, what he wants to be. And when he comes back after that, the character is a bit more understanding. Even though he's still himself, he still acts in horrible ways at times. He's still obsessive with getting this guy. But, yeah, he's a bit more aware of the fragilities around him. He's not quite the same anymore. Which is obviously what Hackman wanted to act and to do. And obviously Frankenheimer wanted to do the same. But it is something that alienated a lot of people watching the film. I think it's the best part of the film, the most interesting part of the film. The first half, before it happens, is interesting watching Frankenheimer put this guy in an area where he's not comfortable after seeing him being very comfortable in New York, the first film. This one, he's not comfortable. And then finally, you see, after it happens, you're seeing him trying to re-establish himself, re-establish his interest in getting the job done, but not quite being the same. But it's still being sneaky. He still does certain things that annoy the police. Because he didn't tell them everything he knows, everything he remembers. And it leads to a great sequence, a great final sequence where they find out one of the guys, who one of the guys are, who's doing they find out where the drugs are. They basically wait it out to get so the guy goes to get paid. After a raid on the drugs as they were getting taken off his boat, then the guy's going to get paid. They find out who he is, find out where he's going, they track him, and then they track the guy who paid him, and they'll follow him back through lots of different routes as the guy's trying to drop any possible tails. Because the guy knows he could be getting tailed at this point, and he does lots of things to avoid getting tailed, but they get him. And it's the biggest suspense sequence of the film, is them trying to keep hold of this, follow this guy and keep him in view. They finally get him, leads to the big fight scene and race, finally having to run away from Doyle, and Doyle's after him. Doyle's going to get him. And at least this thing of doing having him to run through most of Marseille to follow this guy to try and finally get this criminal he's been trying to nail for 2 films. And it's very satisfying. It's really well done. Frankenheimer is great at location. He's great at people in location. And a chase sequence through busy streets is really something to behold. Yeah, I feel he would never get this much access in New York. New York's busier. Because he's a Marseille, he'd worked in France before, he could talk to people and get permissions, and they'd shoot a bit here, shoot a bit there. So you would actually be just closing a bit off here, close a bit off there, and eventually it'd come together to be one big film sequence. So it was a great job. And both films are excellent. Both films are really worth watching. The first one is more obviously brilliant. The second one's very underrated. The second one really does deliver as what a sequel should be, which is follows it up but also changes it slightly in an interesting way. But you can also see why Hackman didn't want to do another one, because it's like, what else was it to do with this guy after these 2 films? There was nothing left to do. So he stopped making the films. He stopped, went off to do other things. He probably could have made some more money doing these films and making them, but I don't think his interest was there anymore. It was like, I don't want to go through this again. So definitely go watch the films. French Connection is a very famous film, but how much has it been watched now? I don't know, but you definitely should try and see it. So it's available on Blu-ray. I think it's on Disney Channel. You know, the old Fox films. Both of them are available if you look for them. Right, that's me for now. Right, bye.